Hello and welcome to my full bookshelf. My name is Philippe and today we're talking about the best and worst books that I've read so far in 2020. As I'm filming this, it's the 1st of July, which means 6 months of the year have gone. Most of them were spent in quarantine, but you know, let's hope for the best for the rest of the year. What I'm doing today is the book tab called Mid-Year Book Freakout, I believe. Obviously I linked down below the people who came up with the idea in the first place, which I think was a couple of people in 2016 or 2014. Here's question 1. The best book I've read in 2020 so far. That is an easy answer for me. East West Read, written by Philippe. Philippe is an international lawyer and he did a lot of research that went into this book. The premise of this book is that Philippe's granddad, Leon, was a Jewish man who was born and raised in the city of Lvov, which is currently in Ukraine. Obviously that part of Europe was incredibly affected by the Second World War, Nazism and discrimination based on religion and sexual preferences. Leon was a man who was Jewish and he found himself in the midst of the Second World War. In the years leading up to it and during the Second World War, he faced a lot of hardship and a lot of dangerous situations. That is just the incipit of the book. The book deals with the story of Leon, but also with other stories that contributed to the idea of international law and the international framework of laws that have to do with human rights. It's very interesting for somebody who has a law background, but it's also really interesting for somebody who's just interested in learning more about that period of time in history. I think it's a really important read, and the reason why I think it's the best book I've read so far is because I can see that there is a lot of love and anger going into this book, but also a lot of research and a lot of careful consideration of various storylines. The second question is the best sequel I've read so far in 2020. Now, I don't really read a lot of sagas or books that have sequels to them. I quite like a standalone book, but if we broaden up the question a little bit and broaden it to a series of books written by the same author on similar themes, then I have Spring by Ali Smith. This is one of the best books I've read this year. It's incredible and it is part of the seasonal quartet. Each book represents a season, so it starts with autumn and the last one, summer, is coming out in a couple of months, in August I believe. Spring is an excellent work of fiction that touches upon many subjects that especially the British population but also immigrants in Britain have had to deal since the Brexit referendum, but also before that. It deals with the idea of immigration, the idea of political differences, it deals with the idea of discrimination, and also touches upon the Windrush generation. It is a very fascinating read, really important, and the thing that I really like about the seasonal quartet is that the books deal with really with particularly hard subjects such as politics, such as immigration and all that, but at the same time Ali Smith writes her book in a very easy way. There is some sort of lyricism to the prose that it makes the reading experience really pleasant, but also it makes the book the kind of book that can be read in two keys. It can be read as a story on its own, but it also can be read with a deeper meaning, a meaning that has political connotations. So it makes it a really smart read, and I would definitely recommend it to somebody who wants to understand more what it feels like to be British or living in Britain, to be more precise, in these years. I think it's going to become a classic for future generations, to be honest. Question number 3 is a book, a new release that I haven't yet read but I want to. I have two answers for this. One is a work of fiction, the other one is not. First one is the work of fiction, which is The Enlightenment of the Greengage Tree by Shokofe Azar. Apologies if that is mispronounced, which probably is the case. This is currently on the shortlist for the International Booker Prize, and the story, I know very little about it, but I know that it is set in Iran in the decade following the 1979 Islamic Revolution. I know hardly anything about the revolution in Iran, but it is one of those parts of history that I feel like I need to know more about. Obviously, going straight into a non-fiction book about that might be a little bit too much. I think this could be an interesting read. I don't know much about it, as I said. It has a stunning cover and I'm really looking forward to reading this. There is a second book as well, and this one is a work on non-fiction by Christina, who's a journalist for the Times and Sunday Times. The book is Our Bodies, Their Battlefield, and is a collection of real stories of women and their experience of war, conflict and sexual violence. I bought this book before it even came out. It was a pre-order and I was supposed to go to the event in Foyles with the author. Obviously that was cancelled because of the coronavirus situation, but nevertheless I bought the book. I haven't read it yet for the only reason that I know this is going to be a hard read, and I know that this is a subject that I'm particularly interested in. I worked on a project about sexual violence during conflict in the past few months, so I know how hard it is to deal with these stories. I feel like right now I'm not in the right mindset to read this kind of book, just because the current situation is getting to me quite a lot. But this is a book that I want to read as soon as I sort of find a little bit more of peace of mind and I can deal with external sources of discomfort and external sources of sadness and points of reflection. Question number 4 is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I have two books I'm particularly interested to read and I'm looking forward to read, and those are The Evening and the Morning by Ken Follett, which is going to be some sort of prequel to the Pillars of the Earth series that he wrote over the past decades. The other book that I'm particularly looking forward to is Summer by Ali Smith. I talked briefly about the Seasonal Quartet before. This is the last installment of the series of books, and as usual, I don't know anything of what's going to be discussed in particular, but I look forward to reading it because I know it's going to be a very moving read in a way, especially for somebody like me who lives in the UK. The next question is the biggest disappointment of 2020 so far. There is one book in particular that was quite disappointing for me, and that was Celeste Ng's Everything I Never Told You. There was nothing wrong with the prose itself, there was nothing wrong with the story itself. It is important that the author wants to deal with certain subjects, but I did find the execution a little bit tedious. I found it a little bit predictable. I found it a little bit too much in your face. I know it's very subjective because I know a lot of people love that book, so I think it probably has to do with me as a reader and the kind of books that I enjoy reading. The execution was just not for me. Then we move on to the next question, which is what was the biggest surprise of 2020 in terms of reading experience? And for me, the biggest surprise was, first of all, winning this book on Twitter, but then also receiving and reading this book. This is The Discomfort of Evening by Marieke Lucas Reinfeldt, published by Faber and Faber. This is a translation of the original book, which came out in Dutch, which is the author's main language. And this book deals with the story of a young girl, her name is Jas, who comes from an extremely religious family of reformists in the Netherlands, and she lives on a farm. Quite early on in the book, she and the rest of the family have to deal with a really hard trauma, and also as a result of that trauma and her upbringing, the main character faces a lot of internal conflict and goes through a story that I found personally haunting, beautiful, incredibly hard to read, and I cannot shut up about it. If you want to know more about that, I'll link somewhere the video where I talked more in detail about this book, but this was one of the most amazing reads of this year. It was so hard, but also very, very, very rewarding as a reading experience, so I would definitely recommend it. I have been recommending it to everyone who's been asking, and yes, I look forward to reading more by the same author. Speaking of authors and surprises, I was surprised to add to the list of my favourite authors a new person. That person is Donna Tartt. Towards the end of last year I read The Goldfinch and I fell in love with the writing, the story and the characters. I was really satisfied as a reader to read a book like this, and that's why I picked up a second-hand copy of The Secret History towards the beginning of the year. I read this and I was left even more satisfied. Well, not even more satisfied. The Goldfinch is still my favourite, but I was really satisfied with the way the story was executed. It was interesting to read, a thriller, if you can call it that way. It's mostly dark academia, but from page one you know what happens, so you do wonder as a reader where is this going to go, but the story kept me hooked the entire time. Donna Tartt's prose is absolutely brilliant and so rewarding, really, that is the word. So she is definitely one of my favourite authors now. I have The Little Friend up there. I haven't read it yet. I look forward to reading it, but I do have a feeling it's going to be a book that I like less than this too, but I look forward to reading it regardless. Number 8, newest fictional crush. I don't really tend to get fictional crushes anymore. I think I'm going to use this question just to have an excuse to talk about one of the characters I really liked and that I found quite sexy in a way, but also not really hot in any way. And that is Ji-soon from The Other's Gold by Elizabeth Ames. Ji-soon is one of the key 4 protagonists of the story. She is Korean, but she lives in the United States. The thing I like about her is the fact that she is very loyal to her Korean ancestry and upbringing, but at the same time she incorporates aspects of other cultures that where she lives. So for instance, she goes to boarding school in Europe and she carries with her some aspects of European life. When she moves to the US to go to college, she incorporates parts of the American experience into her life, and then she is a character that stays true to her beliefs and to her dreams and to what she enjoys. So that in her case is art, it's the fact that she does not want children, it's the fact that she wants to travel, and yeah, it's a character that I was inspired by. It's not necessarily a crush, but I liked her, and I think if I were to find a character to befriend in all these books, it would probably be her. Number 9 is favourite new character. Now, there are many characters that I really enjoyed reading about in these books, but there is one that really stood out, and it's a character that is going to be close to my heart for quite some time, and that is Pecola, or Pecola, I'm not sure how to say it, from The Bluest. She's the main character in this book, and basically the entire story revolves around the fact that she wants to have blue eyes and be a pretty girl. Instead, according to the book obviously, she is black and she doesn't identify as a pretty girl. Throughout the book you realise why she's feeling this way and all the various events that led to her life being the kind of life that it is. I found Pecola, or Pecola, such a beautiful character. Like, it's a very well-rounded character, and you can see that there are many aspects to her personality that have been influenced by her history and her story and her upbringing, and it's fascinating to learn more about her story. That being said, the next question is, what book made me cry? I sort of shed a tear or two for a couple of books. One of them being Station 11, just because going through a pandemic and reading about a pandemic was a little bit much. But the other book that genuinely made me cry, as in almost sobbing cry, was this book that I finished yesterday, and I'm going to talk more about in my June reading wrap-up. This is Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor, translated by Sophie Hughes, I believe. Yeah, Sophie Hughes. I cried like a little baby at the end of it. It has a very... it's a hard read. It's not a read for everyone. There is a lot of abuse, there is a lot of graphic scene, there is a lot of poverty, there is a lot of drug abuse, there is a lot of machism, macho culture and all that. This book portrays not the life, but all the various events that lead to a tragic event that you know from the beginning of the book. in this tiny little village slash town in Mexico. The author, I believe, is Mexican herself, and this is a work of fiction, but I do believe it's probably a work of fiction that is based on events that happen, unfortunately, in Mexico, just like in many other countries around the world. It's a tragic read, it's a hard read, but at the same time it's a very satisfying and I think important read. Moving on from that, a book that made me happy, and that book is At the Pond, Swimming at the Hampstead Ladies Pond. This was also in my May book wrap up, and it's one of the nicest books I read this year. It's a very easy read, it's a very quick read, it's a collection of short stories slash essays revolving around the Hampstead Ladies Pond, which is in northwest London. And reading this outside at 6 o'clock in the morning in the garden was one of the most beautiful experiences of this year. All the stories are from women who have swum at the pond and have a deep connection with water. And it just made me feel so happy with myself, regardless of the fact that, hey, we're stuck at home because there is a pandemic going on. It sort of made me travel without needing to travel. A beautiful book that I either bought or received this year. Obviously, The Discomfort of Evening. It has one of the most stunning covers I've ever seen. It's beautiful. I can't stop looking at it, and it relates so well to the key character in the story. The second one that I think has something in common with this, well, more than something in common with this, is Anne Patchett's The Dutch House. And first of all, this book was fantastic. It was a 5-star for me, and you'll hear more about it in my June reading wrap up. But the cover I find absolutely gorgeous. This is one of the characters in the story, and I believe this painting was made to be the cover of this book. So it's an actual painting that was commissioned to become the cover of this book, and I think it was so worth it because it's perfect and I love it, and it's the most beautiful book I own, I think. The penultimate question is, what books do I need to read by the end of the year? Now, I don't set myself any goals, I don't give myself a list of books that I need to read, but this year I do certainly want to incorporate more Black authors to my reading list. As you might have noticed from my previous wrap-ups and also from this video, this year especially, I haven't read many Black authors. That probably has to do a lot with the fact that I subconsciously tend to look for books that deal with experiences similar to mine. Obviously, being a white person coming from a fairly middle-class environment, my own personal experience might be very different from somebody who is Black. That being said, that needs to change because I want to make a conscious effort, that is to hear more voices, see more voices and educate myself in order to be a better person, but also somebody who understands more the Black experience. That being said, there are some books that I wrote down because I really want to read, including, you probably can't see, A Brief History of 7 Killings up there by Marlon James. And then also Giovannis Room has been recommended to me. Apparently it's a book that deals with the Black experience but also with the LGBTQ plus experience. I don't know much about that. I think part of it is set in Paris. That's as far as my knowledge of this book and blurb knows. But I want to pick that up next time I actually physically go into a bookshop. Another book that I've been meaning to read for months now, and I'm punching myself mentally because last time I was in a bookshop, I was in a bookshop in Shoreditch and it had just come out in paperback. And as you probably know, I tend to buy books in paperback rather than hardbacks because I'm running out of space. And that is Girl, Woman, Other. And I remember looking at it and then saying, oh, I'll buy it in a couple of weeks once I read a couple more books that I have on my TBR. Then lockdown happened and that didn't happen anymore. But that book is Girl, Woman, Other. I've been trying to order it online twice and both times sold out before before my order was processed, so I got the money refunded and all that. But that means I still haven't read that book. Then there is another book that I really want to read that's mostly following the experience of reading The Bluest this month, and that book is Beloved by Toni Morrison. I've never read Beloved, but a lot of people say it's equally good or maybe even better than The Bluest. I find The Bluest to be a really moving book. I'm wondering what Beloved is going to be about and what it's going to be like, so I look forward to picking that up next time in a bookshop or next time I place an online order. final question, which is who are my favorite bookish creators online? And I mean, there are plenty of people, but there are 4 people that I tend to watch the most, depending on my mood and depending on what my aim is. So in no specific order, a content creator who produces content that has to do with books, but not necessarily strictly only books, and that is Morgan Long. She is based in the United States and she lives surrounded by nature. She does beautiful reading vlogs, but also content that deals with the experience of being a creative person. I believe she is a video producer slash filmmaker slash editor, and the way her vlogs and videos are edited is just very relaxing. So if I have a really hard day, I tend to watch her videos to just relax and turn it down a little bit. Another person I love following on BookTube is Lauren Wade. Lauren Wade has very similar reading taste to mine, so I enjoy watching her reading vlogs, but also videos in which she talks about what she's read throughout the month. She always incorporated a wide variety of genres, authors and types of books in her videos, so it's quite nice to have some sort of broad idea of what is out there in terms of books that you can buy, whether that's fiction, non-fiction, memoir or something else. Another booktuber that I started following quite recently is the Artisan Geek. She is a booktuber and she mostly does sit-down videos. She talks a lot about classics and books that deal with race and identity. I found her channel just after the killing of George Floyd, and that was because I don't know whether hopefully the YouTube algorithm worked in a way that I managed to see more black content creators, or it's because somebody recommended her to me. I genuinely cannot remember, but I'm so glad I found that channel because her videos are not only very interesting to watch, but they are genuinely instructive. She talks in a way that I think the closest thing that I can relate to is having a primary school teacher talking to you in a way that makes you interested in the stuff that you're reading, even though maybe you wouldn't normally pick it up. So it's definitely a channel I would recommend to people, and she's so knowledgeable and she speaks with, I don't know, she's got so much passion for books, and I really enjoy seeing people that have such passion for books. And the final one is Read with Cindy, and this is the kind of video that I watch when I am doing activities that maybe I don't like doing that much, like washing dishes or cooking on a day when I don't want to cook. Cindy has got so much energy, and I love when she talks about books that she's hated. Obviously she does, she has a few travel / reading vlogs as well on her channel, but it's just so funny to hear her talk about books that she's read, and that includes also books that she loved, because she can see very critically the books that she is reading with a really critical eye, and it's quite funny to see how different people react to the same books. I have read a few books that Cindy has read as well, and we've reacted in very different ways, with the exception of historical fiction, because we both cry like little babies whenever there is a war story, especially set in World War II. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Do check out the content creators that I mentioned. Do check out the people who came up with the book tag. And do not forget that this is one of my very first videos on the channel. So if it is not perfect, if I don't sound great, I'm sorry. Please be nice though, and leave me some comments, some feedback, and do recommend this video to other people. And if you're inspired to do this BookTube tag because of this video, do let me know. Thank you.